Okay, this video is going to be a little bit different than the other ones that I have on my channel, but I wanted to show how I do my pixel art and just talk a little bit about the process and how I personally create the art for my game. Also, sorry for how much I zoom in and out of the drawing during this entire video. Obviously, it's sped up. Also, if you don't want to listen to me talk, feel free to just mute this and like play some lo-fi music or something in the background and just watch me draw. But I'm using Sprite for pixel art here, and usually just to start, I like to have a really big canvas, way bigger usually than I'm gonna need for the sprite. And then I start with creating sort of a basic outline and shape of what I want the building to look like. Oh, also this building, the intention behind it is this is going to be the restaurant in the game. So a place that the NPCs and the player can go and buy more like high-end pre-cooked foods. And I kind of just wanted to give this like a tavern feel. Usually when I go in with my sprites, I don't have like too big of a plan. I use like a couple reference photos sometimes, but I tend to not follow them very closely and kind of just try things out with the sprites, either deleting or adding things that I don't like about how they look. I also always use the same color palette, so this like dark color palette you're seeing on the side. I always just use that and then take variations of those colors. Sometimes I'll go a little bit off the palette, but I try to stick to this more muted, dull, darker color palette. So to start, I just do a little bit of blocking and outlining of the building, the general shape. I use a smaller sprite of the player, oh not a smaller sprite, it's just I use the sprite of the player just for reference for size of the sprite. And I wanted this to be a little bit of a bigger building, so a lot bigger than most of the buildings within the game. And I also wanted it to be 2 floors, because I don't have any 2-story buildings in the game yet as well. So I just wanted to create a little bit of variation. I try to think of like what I haven't done yet and what I can kind of add in the game that'll be unique for the player to experience. So here I am going in and just adding things on top of the roof. I'm just essentially creating this like wooden panel effect, and I go in and add some like darker highlights usually to the bottom of the plank and then a lighter highlight right on top of it. This kind of mimics where like the light would usually hit an object if it was in 3D, because obviously all of my sprites are in 2D, so I kind of have to like create that 3D effect on them. And then now I'm just going in with like a lighter opacity brush and really just like layering these lines to give like the wood almost like a grainy effect. I do a lot with I use a lot of the different tools in Sprites in just like a weird way, I feel like. I like to kind of like turn down the opacity, honestly, in a lot of the colors and then kind of layer how everything looks. I also don't put a very dramatic like outline on a lot of the sprites. Some of the older sprites do have an outline, but now that I've found my style a little bit better, I kind of like how this looks with like less of an outline effect on the sprite. But I mean, pixel art in general is subjective. You can kind of do whatever you want. This is just how my style is for it. So you can see I'm kind of adding like a line, but it's like very subtle. And this, I was just like experimenting with how I wanted the edge of the roof to look. I ended up not liking this at all, honestly. So yeah, here I am creating just like a bigger wooden beam effect on top. I'm trying to get the shape right. Usually just using like the curved tools and stuff, the curved like line tool in Sprite to get something that looks good. And then I ended up making this actually flip the other way because, I don't know, I just was like, I feel like this maybe will work out better. That like curved roof on the top just like wasn't looking good. So I kind of like flipped it to look like it was going the other way instead. And then I'm adding just a little bit of shadow onto the roof here to create a bit more just like texture and depth. I really, like I said, try to layer the sprites because I think it just looks a lot better and like more realistic. I don't know. I'm also not extremely perfect with my pixel art. Usually my sprites, like the character sprites, are on a scale of 64 by 64 pixels. And this is a pretty big pixel size for compared to like what some people use for pixel art. Sometimes you can use like a just like 32 by 32 or even like 12-bit pixel art. But I found for me it's a lot easier, honestly. I like using the bigger pixel size because it gives me a lot more room for error. I'm not very precise and perfect with my pixels. Like I mentioned in the past, my background in art isn't in just like pixel art, it's more so in painting and like drawing. So I feel like having a bigger pixel size kind of allows me to mimic the art style of drawing or painting almost a little bit more by having a bit, by not having to have the pixels extremely perfect on the canvas. It's okay if a couple pixels are out of place. It's not very noticeable, and if anything, it makes it look a little bit more organic. And then now I'm just adding a little bit of texture onto the building. I like to use it's like the spray tool, I think, in Aesprites at like a really big setting, and taking like a slightly either darker or lighter opacity color to the one that I'm just using on the back of the building, and then kind of layering that on top of itself to create this basically like a texture on the building that almost kind of mimics like those like popcorn ceilings or something. I don't know what that's called. I'm also adding shadows on the building as well right now. So I have like one shadow color, it's like a purpley shadow color on the palette that I use, and then I'll kind of like layer that a little bit to create something that I think matches what the shadows in the building would like look like. But it's basically just like a lighter opacity purple, yeah, that kind of like will allow some of the color behind it to shine through, and then also just be consistent throughout the game. Alright, now I'm just making a doorway. I tend to try to reuse a lot of the assets as best I can, so this is just the wood that I created, or that I used for the top of the roof. I'm now basically reusing that and just rotating it a few times to create the doorway, and once again also just like not requiring that's like super perfect. So that's why like the top, you know, I have some of those like pixels kind of sticking out, but I don't know, I just like how it looks. It gives it a little more character. My intention was to make like a stall on the building. That's what that like orange rectangle is, but I ended up not adding that in. You'll see me like removing it later. And here I'm just reusing the wood texture once again, and sometimes when you stretch the sprites in Aesprite, I try my best to like stretch and like rotate and reuse sprites, but you do kind of have to like go back in and clean them up a little bit because it kind of will like warp them. And I'm just adding some more shadow on the bottom of the building. This kind of helps with making the sprites look a lot more 3D and less flat, like they're actually like on the ground and not just like floating above it. And now I was trying to do this like wood like cross beam effect, and I couldn't really figure out how I wanted it to look, honestly. Like I said, I wanted it to be more, this to be like more tavern like originally. Yeah, you can see me kind of just like copy pasting it and like layering it around and being like, okay, I hate that, I'm just gonna delete it. But I still kind of want it, you know, like I already spent time trying to do this, I'm gonna make it work. And then I ended up just like flipping the sprites around, kind of making this like X shape in the back. And it is a little bit, it's like technically not completely like even on both sides, but that's fine. Like I said, I like to make things a little bit imperfect because in real life, you know, textures and things like that aren't always gonna be perfect. And now I'm adding a brick texture. I'm actually reusing the bricks from another building. I try to also reuse textures and stuff from other sprites. One, because it's faster and I'm lazy. And two, because it helps kind of create more cohesive buildings within the game by, you know, like using this brick texture from other buildings within this building. It kind of, I don't know, it just makes everything match. And it's like a lot faster, like I said. So I was just tiling that, and then here's the like stall thing that I was gonna do. I was gonna make maybe like a stall outside where you could like get fast, like quick food or something like that, but I don't really feel like that makes sense because this is gonna be more of like a higher end restaurant, I think, is what it ended up being. And yeah, there's not really gonna be just like, I don't know, why would there be like a little stall outside of it? So I think, I mean, maybe I'll use that idea like on another sprite or something somewhere. Or like use this just completely separately. But I ended up, yeah, not liking it, so I just kind of moved it to the side and was like, I'll save that for later. I can always like, yeah, I can always reuse the sprites just like in another context or somewhere else in the game if I don't like it. So yeah, instead I just moved that brick texture over that was gonna originally be hidden, and then I put a big window here on the bottom instead. I'm just adding some detailing to the window right now, and then I'm going back up to the roof. I kind of just like work where in like parts, like wherever I kind of see like, oh, I need to add some detail in here, like work on this part next. I don't know, I tend to jump around a lot when I'm working on these sprites. So now I realized the roof looked like very, very flat and needed to be a little bit more like have like depth or that like 3D effect, because I mean these aren't just like 2D sprites, so you kind of have to like fake it looking 3D. So I just kind of copied, yeah, some of the texture from the roof in the front and then like rotated it around, and then it didn't fully fit, so now I have to add some stuff on the bottom right here and just adding a little more texture so that kind of blends in as best I can. I also like, yeah, sometimes I just went in there and like used the blurring tool just to make it blend in, and then just copy that on the other side nice and easy. And now I'm just filling in the top of the roof as well, once again to give that like 3D effect that makes these 2D sprites seem like they're not so flat. Just adding a tiny bit of shadow, I don't know, because like it looks better. It adds a little more, like the shadows are really what adds a lot of depth to the sprites. I find it makes them look a lot more 3D. Adding shadows to places where the light would be, you know, on top. You can kind of see with these beams, the light is on the top and then the shadow would kind of hit underneath. And here I am just adjusting the roof again because I wasn't sure how I wanted that to look, honestly. Yeah, I went back in with this roof a few times, honestly, because I still wasn't, like, fully happy with the angles and how it looked in the game. I felt like it just kind of it looked too, like, I don't know. Like, it didn't, the depth wasn't correct, and it's probably one of the hardest things for 2D drawings is getting, you know, that look, faking that look of 3D. So here finally I was happy with it, and then I moved on to the other parts. I darkened up these panels on the top because I thought they were too bright and they kind of looked like windows, which wasn't my intention. I wanted to have windows that are this like blue color to match to the rest of the sprites in the game. So I made these windows and then I was like, okay, these are way too big. They're covering up a lot of that detail I'd added, which, like, why would I, you know, yeah, I don't want to do that. I already spent a lot of time adding that like paneling detail, so I ended up making smaller windows and just kind of copy pasting those across, and then I deleted it because I realized that like it's way easier if you finish the first sprite fully and then you copy paste it instead of just like copy and pasting all the ones that aren't finished. And then I went back in and added some more detail onto this window because I felt like it looked, oh my god, zooming in and out so much, sorry. But I felt like it, yeah, just lacked a lot of texture, and then I realized my lines weren't even, so I just made the window a little shorter. Alright, here I'm going back to the roof again because I still wasn't sure if I liked this type of roof, and then I was like gonna maybe add a triangle on top, and I was like, no, that doesn't look good either. And after this, I was pretty happy with how the windows and stuff were looking, so I just wanted to add some more little like details to the sides of the windows. So some just like shutters, I guess, on the ends of this window. And then I was gonna try to add like smaller shutters here and see how that looked. But then once again I realized, okay, now I'm blocking those like wooden panels that I put in the back, and I was like, alright, never mind, we're just not gonna do that. Okay, and finally the last little like detail that I wanted to add to this building to just make it look, I don't know, more interesting was these like wind chimes on the sides of the building. And this honestly took forever to do, but I don't know, sometimes when I do pixel art, it's just kind of like relaxing and like chill. So I ended up making like way more of these and spending a lot more time on these than I probably like normally would have, but I don't know, I was just like having fun doing it and like making different kinds of wind chimes and stuff like that and seeing how they looked. Because at first I was like, oh, I could have just copied and pasted all of these technically, and like that still would have looked really cool, honestly. And maybe just added like a slight color variation, but I don't know, I kind of went like overboard with the details and just made all of them completely different. So yeah, here I am. I'm still just doing these, like I said, I think there's like 5 I did in total, and they just took like a decent amount of time. But, I don't know, I just, like I said, I feel very relaxed when I do pixel art sometimes, so I didn't mind that they took time, and it's just kind of fun to make things that look a little bit, I don't know, unique, and you can kind of just be creative with it. And like, most of the time, like, I'm looking at like a couple reference pictures for these, but I am mostly just kind of winging it and just seeing, you know, if I like things, how they look, and then if I don't, I just delete it and I do it slightly differently. I probably will have to slightly adjust these wind chimes though, unfortunately, because in Unity they look kind of weird when you walk. I'm not sure if it's just me that notices it, but the sprites are kind of like too thin almost. That they kind of have this like weird flashing effect. I don't know. I might have to just adjust the colors or something or so. I also did end up making animations for every single one of these as well. You'll see them at the very end of the video so that they look kind of like they're blowing in the wind. This last one, I made those kind of like a bell almost, because I was kind of running out of ideas for sprites. And then I was like, oh, maybe I should add these on the bottom of the door. That would look cool too. And I mean, it does look pretty cool. But it all, like, I mean, most of the time, like I said, I'm copy pasting this stuff, so it doesn't take as long as, I don't know, it kind of looks, I guess. I'm also going in and adding slight shadows to the bottom of the sprites, and this kind of just gives it a little more depth and makes it look like it's less like flat. I probably could make like more accurate shadows, but honestly I don't think it's that big a deal. It's mostly just trying to make the sprites not look as flat. And here I'm just taking those bells again and just adding them on different parts of the building. They end up looking slightly different in the game, and that's because, like I said, I animated these sprites, so I didn't... The positioning you're seeing right here isn't exactly what is going to end up being in the game. Because those all ended up being like separate sprites on a separate layer. And then the last detail I kind of wanted to add was like an awning, if that's the right word, for the window. So just trying to get the depth correct for this right now. It's a little tricky getting like the angles correct, and then I just kind of like, usually once one side looks good, I'll just copy paste the other side so it's even. And now, yeah, adding a little bit more depth and shadow and highlight to places where the light would hit. And then I was kind of experimenting with color because I was like, I don't know if I want this to be green, maybe I want it to be purple instead, or maybe blue. And then I ended up just making it green again. And then I was like, maybe, yeah, maybe blue, maybe a darker green. I think I ended up just making this, it's just like a light green. So yeah, sometimes, like I said, you just kind of gotta change the colors or the way things look and just see how they look for yourself. And then if it doesn't look right, you just can go back in and change it. It's okay. Adding a little bit of texture and depth in this like scalloped pattern on the bottom, and some more shadow as well. I ended up adding a lot of shadow to this because I was like, alright, if this is like overhanging a window, it would have like a way deeper, longer, I don't know, shadow than just the, like, right along the edges. And then I was like, alright, every single awning picture I look at has like has stripes on it. Usually when I like try to do something like this, I'll look up like whatever I want and then like pixel art version for a reference. Sometimes it's good to look at like the real thing. Like for the chimes, I looked at just like real pictures of chimes, but like for this, I looked at like pixel art pictures of how other people drew it and then kind of like did my own version of that. Because it is, like I said, hard to get the angles correct when you're doing like this 3D. Oh, and then I forgot to film this by accident, and I made these like signs as well to just like put the name of the restaurant stuff on. And then here's the chime animation that I did within Unity to give it a little more life. I also add lights in Unity, and this really gives a lot more, I don't know, just like detail to the objects. I think this is what really makes the game look good, honestly, is these lights. I'm even adding lights on the windows themselves, just like very dull, or yeah, just like very like dim lights. But here is the final look of the restaurant.